Hey everyone, I'm JP Cole.
And I'm Julie Cole.
And these are our daughters, Jenna and Julia. We are the co-owners of Cole Wellness, which is a therapeutic wellness center in Irmo, South Carolina, dedicated to improving lives through counseling and personal training. During the COVID-19 crisis, we have limited all of our services to what's available via telehealth, which is audio and video therapy and counseling. So if that's something that you're interested in, please check us out at info@colewellness.com.
Absolutely. And we can also do health coaching via those means as well. So last week we kind of dived into this topic of grief, and we decided to do a little series, and we're going to see where it takes us. So just kind of join us as we walk through this collective grief that we're going through and talk about grief from a few different perspectives.
Yep.
Thank you for your time. And
thank you so much.
We look forward to offering you some good content.
Bye. What's up, everyone? I'm JP Cole.
And I'm Julie Cole.
And this is the Cole Wellness Podcast. We're in the middle of the grief series.
Yeah.
And we're returning for week 4 of this series, or week 16 overall, I think.
That's right.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about another kind of phase of grief that we have thought of and experienced.
Grief through life transitions.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because we're going through one right now, like a forced life transition.
Yeah.
I have to laugh. I woke up this morning with my eye all swollen, so I have to acknowledge that because I feel like you can see that my eyes are swollen. But my allergies go crazy when it rains, and they're going crazy right now. Yeah. So this is where my allergies come out in my eyes.
Yeah.
Go team.
Go team.
It's been a while since I've had a swollen eye. Yeah. JP can tell you some funny stories about my swollen eyes.
They happen commonly.
Like Hitch like Will Smith from Hitch.
Yeah.
All of a sudden I'm like, are my eyes swollen?
She's like, turns her head and is
like, So anyway, okay, we digress. So the gratitude point today is transparency and authenticity.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about life transitions, and I think what helps people find hope that they can survive life transitions is the experience of other people.
Yeah, hearing that other people got through it.
Yeah. And even right now with the COVID-19 stuff, it's that people are getting through it. People are really sharing. And so we've even joked at ourselves, like our first blog was like, here's all these strategies. And then like a couple of weeks ago, we're like, what are you doing to feel human? Right? Like, are you taking a shower?
Yeah.
Are you washing your hair? Like, are you shaving your legs? You shaved your neck this morning. You know? So, are you not cutting bangs? Those kinds of things.
Okay.
That's a funny joke. Females know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Y'all know what I'm talking about. So, so I guess we need to define life trend, but the authenticity piece. When we found recovery, what gave me hope was meeting other people who had survived. And not only survived, but actually lived to tell the tale that life in recovery was exponentially better than life in addiction.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing about things that are toxic for us. And we talked about this in our first series, is that we can know that they're not working. We can know that they make us sick. We can know that they're hurting us.
Yeah.
But it's that better the devil we know, right? We know it's predictable. Like, so we can have it.
I know this shitty. I don't know what the other kind of shitty would feel like.
That's right. And we don't know how to trust it. And so where we learn to trust it and bridge that gulf between what we can see and imagine in our own lives and what it might be in another life is we grab onto the hope of another person. And when we do a lot of training for peer support, we talk about hope is essential to the change equation. And there's been some studies done around this, like hope makes up about 10% of what people bring to the table in an overall change process. But it's the first 10%. Without that hope to unlock the door and open it, people don't. So that's why I thought of transparency and authenticity, because
Well, and I heard something the other day with one of the guys I do a book study with. So I'm totally stealing it from him. But the idea that he kind of proposed was that, hope and fear are kind of two different sides of the same coin. That fear is this predicting an outcome that we don't like, and hope is this predicting an outcome that we would like. And so it's really important to be able to look forward and feel like that a possible outcome for us could be good and isn't just this fearful place.
Right.
But we don't know that, Sorry, I'm getting ahead of
No.
Yeah.
I was connecting. So
Okay, yeah.
for the content in a minute. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, you're fine.
Because it without anything behind it, it's just hope.
Yeah.
Right? It's that 3 frogs on a log. They've only made a decision.
Yeah.
And we can get high on the idea of what it looks like for our life to be better, but not actually do anything different.
Yeah. There has to be something done behind it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that happens with a lot of people. They make the commitment. Like we've laughed and talked about how all the times we've cleaned out the cabinets and done all this stuff. And then a week later, we're back at the grocery store buying the shit we threw away. Yeah, we threw away. And stuff. So, I mean, there's some truth to that. I mean, let's just okay.
I think you're good.
I wore pink lipstick today because my eye's swollen. So I wanted to look cute. And a dress. I wore a dress.
You look cute.
I did not wear pajama bottoms either. I had a work mullet on for a little while.
You were contemplating it.
So
so gratitude for transparency and authenticity is the thing that for other people being able to do that has enabled us to have hope in so many different areas of life, whether that's in recovery or marriage or business or parenting, or it's really important to have people who have been transparent and honest about the difficulty of it, that it wasn't all easy, but then you can also see them thrive in the midst of all that.
Right.
Is the thing that kind of keeps us moving forward.
Absolutely.
And I think that this series is talking about how do we process and continue to move forward through grief, and allow it to be what it is, but also not just allow it to just sit and fester, but to continue moving forward. And I think that kind of like with recovery, we talk about it never fully. There's never going to be a day where I don't have to consider it and think about it, but the hope is that it gets much different. And
absolutely. So. Well, and that becomes the norm versus the other way of life. Like, so we've talked about this. There was this in what we're going to talk about today is there's this place where you turn a corner and you go from running from something to moving towards something.
Yeah,
right?
That's a big deal.
And so that's where the coin, it does flip. It flips from fear to hope. And they talk about that in the AA Big Book. Like if we were only bonded in the
fear of the consequences,
then we wouldn't get anywhere. It's it's the hope of what happens after the big debacle, right? Or the big. So let's clear up like what a life transition is by our definition. And I'm sure there's lots of people with lots of clinical definitions, and I'm going to throw out the disclaimer. This is us talking about our life process. And we actually have been JP's been walking alongside me, and actually you've been doing your own level of grieving with it, because like you've had to kind of sit in. I went through burnout, like a terrible case of burnout, like soul crushing burnout. And I've been about 18 months on the other side of it, and it's still something we're walking through, like still something that I'm trying to come back from, still something I'm trying to deconstruct and kind of walk through. And it's really a process of unbecoming versus becoming. It's a process of being quiet and still versus productive, and which is an interesting distinction for you, because I've always been the hustler, right? I've always, had 2 or 3 jobs and went to school and did internships and work jobs. I mean, I was just the 24-hour-a-day news cycle. And now, I've tried to pare that down for my sanity. And how does that, how do we walk through that? So that's why we were thinking about this, because we've actually walked through this, and I've had to grieve a lot. I know you have too, had to do your own of that, and how it looks different. So life transition. And so there are life transitions that people go through that are really rites of passage, right? So all the markers of early life, kindergarten graduation. So we have a little kid who's, one of our children is going to not have her kindergarten celebration, right? Well, I just thought about that last night. I was like, we're okay with that. I think about all of our friends that have kids that are going through transitions, big transitions. So our next door neighbor's daughter, they lost the 8th grade dance. There's a lot of seniors who've lost prom.
I've got a lot of clients dealing with that. Seniors in high school, seniors in college that were like, this was my semester that I was wrapping up a couple of classes. I was going to spend time with all of my friends that, I've built several years of relationship with. And then I'm about to go into this other phase of life that I know is going to be totally different. And I feel, this unexpected thing has happened. that we couldn't have planned for, and now that is completely gone.
Yeah, I wonder, it's interesting you're saying that. It made me think about, I wonder what Judson's life would have looked like if he hadn't had the Appalachian Trail.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so that's my little brother. He spent 5 or 6 months hiking the Appalachian Trail between undergrad and grad school.
Yeah.
And it was such a formative experience for him. And they
Yeah.
blogged it along the way and all the things they
Yeah.
learned, but I really think it fine-tuned him as a human being. I mean, he was already a pretty awesome person.
Once in a lifetime experience.
Yeah. And so, you know, what are these, and these are privileged questions I recognize, because there are some people who don't have the, you know, but these are rites of passage. I mean, I remember holding with, you know, class day and being able to give my parents a thank you present, and laughing at all of our, you know, senior quotes and the fight we had for our senior song and, you know, all of that stuff, you know what I mean? And then what was it like to have senior cut day? What was it like to go through that last, you know, week of school where everybody else was taking exams and we didn't have to? And there's all these pieces that you feel like you earned to get there. Yeah. And it's so anticlimactic for so many of these kids right now.
Yeah. To not have that.
And how many people do we know who've had to postpone and cancel weddings? You know? Yeah. Postpone. We've known quite a few. Yeah. Actually, one of our friends.
What an important, you know, phase of life transition where it's kind of like you want to be able to do it in a certain way. And I'm hearing creative, you know, ways that people are getting it done. Yeah. But at the same exact time, like, how important is that you've been looking forward to this thing where all of your friends and family are going to get together and celebrate your union with another human being, and then that can't happen the way that you want it to. You know? Right.
And we have a friend, her son's a senior, so he's missing out on his senior year. Her daughter's graduating from college, and she's missing her college graduation, and she was supposed to be getting married through all of this. So, you know, like 3 major events that she's having to help walk her older children through, you know, and then try to hold on to her own hat and, you know, keep life going. So, so these are rites of passage. Like, these aren't the kinds of life transitions we're talking about. And the reason why we're even talking about them in the context of grief is that people are having to grieve them right now. Yeah. Like, it's a different thing. What we're really talking about is life transitions. Like, so many of these life transitions we're going to talk about are common, but they're not planned for. I didn't plan for my addiction. So recovery was like getting sober was a life transition. That was, it marked a huge, you know, transition in my life, but there was a lot about it that was hard, you know. My parents going through a divorce. That was a huge life transition for me. And it is for a lot of people. Yeah. Let's see what else. Loss of our own relationships, friendships, and romantic relationships. I've gone through some heartbreaking, you know, breakups, and stuff. Grappling with the emergence of a chronic disease, recovery from mental health disorder, right? And then, you know, grappling with professional burnout, which at my phase in life, I'm coming across a lot of friends that are starting to grapple with that, right? And Richard Rohr would talk about that as first and second half of life stuff, right? You stop going from the hustle to the, you know, slow turn inward. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, my thought is that there's that coin flip in midlife too, where all these transitions on the front end are, I'm looking forward to something. And as we cross that midpoint, it turns more into, I'm letting go of something. I have to reduce something. I'm, you know, so, you know,
well, and it's that, you know, it really is that when you start thinking about, like, you know, Erickson stages and stuff like that, I talk a lot with people about, you know, you do have this switch where you stop thinking about, you know, what am I producing and like producing for my good versus my growth, right? My growth, my family's growth, my stuff too. What is the legacy I leave behind? And those heart questions are a lot different than those external questions. Yeah. But we talk about this, you know, like all these transitions mark a loss. So that's why we're talking about them in the context of grief. So
something not turning out the way that we wanted it to. We feel like we're losing out on an outcome. Interestingly, though, we normally find out on the back end that we didn't miss out on anything. It was like you know, it feels like a gift if we can process through it
Right, but the process of getting there
Mhm.
can be really
It's
difficult.
painful. Yeah.
And what we have a tendency to do, like, so the thing about it though is we grab on to the authenticity that other people bring to the table gives us something to grab onto,
Mhm.
right, for hope. It can also be, there's a difference between somebody sharing their story and using it as a marker of hope, and somebody sharing their story and trying to control your story.
Yeah.
Like, we see this in sponsorship,
Mhm.
right? The person who's like, well, if you want what I have, you better do what I did to get there, you
Mhm.
know? And it's like, if you're not calling every day or taking your sponsor suggestions, it becomes
Do it my way.
yeah, versus sitting in space with
Mhm.
people and offering some guidance and thoughts, you know,
Mhm.
but allowing people the space to figure it out for themselves.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief, and this
Mhm.
week I actually came across this thing called the 7 stages of grief. And I'm
Mhm.
looking at my computer a lot because I want to make sure I get it right.
Yeah.
It's an evolution, and there's this social worker named by the last name of Williams who kind of did some research on it,
Mhm.
and they expanded it. And so the 7 stages that they expanded it to are: 1, shock and denial;
Mhm.
2, pain and guilt;
Mhm.
3, anger and bargaining; 4, depression, reflection, and loneliness, right? 5, the upward turn; 6, reconstruction and working through; and then 7 is acceptance and hope.
Mhm.
So we're going to kind of like address some of these, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So actually, what really jumped out at me about this is that the concept of denial has always been a hard one for me.
Mhm.
As we've gotten into doing more and more research around this concept of motivation,
Mhm.
human behavior, motivation, ambivalence, which
Yeah.
we talked in an earlier episode about feeling two ways about one thing, knowing I need to make a change and maybe being fearful of making it.
Yeah.
We always have this tendency to see it as this black or white binary thing, and it's not.
Yeah.
So
Denial.
well, just change.
Yeah.
Right. And we have a tendency to say denial, like the person knows they need to change something and they're just, you know, they're just refusing to do it, or they're denying the truth, even though it's right in front of their face.
We falsely assume that denial is this conscious, intentional
Sure.
thing rather than this oftentimes unconscious, unintentional, unknowing.
Sure.
Everybody else can see it in me except for me kind of a thing.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
And so, you know, that's why with this thing, when it said shock and denial, I was like, yeah, I mean, I think what we call denial a lot of times for people when they're making recognition, like when they're having recognitions about themselves, it's not uncommon for people to have these flares of what we would call awareness. And then they kind of go back into the darkness, they turtle back up.
Yeah.
And sometimes people can't, they're numb, can't really process it. I mean, I think about coming out of blackouts, and sometimes, you know, they talk about in the big book, like the incomprehensible demoralization, right? You know, like I can remember coming to and being like, oh my gosh, like the landscape of my life. So what did I do? I became combative with people. I became argumentative. I became defensive because I couldn't sit with that. You know what I mean? I came out of you know, I'm in the hospital being treated for an overdose, and I'm mad at everybody else, you know? And so when people are always in shock about that makes perfect sense to me, because the traumatic experience was different for me, you know? So we call that denial, but it's really shock, right? So it's more of a passive rather than an active process.
Yeah.
It's a defense mechanism.
It's an automatic response.
Yeah.
With the COVID-19 thing, it makes me think of it like as when the country first got shut down. It's like everybody's like, oh yeah, we're definitely going back to school.
Yeah.
It's just, this is going to be 14 days and we're going to get back. And then it was like it slowly kind of sunk in, and just, you know, as people started understanding what was really going on, it's like, wait a second, like not this semester, not this summer, like possibly not this fall, like oh crap. And at first it's just, we're in shock. We're like, oh yeah, it couldn't possibly be that big of a change. It's just, we'll get through it. And we will get through it. It's just not going to look like what we thought it was going to look like. Sorry, my stomach is.
Can you hear it?
Golly.
Like I can hear it across the house when the stomach starts like growling. I was sitting out back the other day, kind of looking at the sky, and just kind of like what I do for a mental health break is when my kids are acting crazy, I'll lock them inside the house and I'll go outside the house and I'll sit in the sun and take a little sun break. And I'm like, they try to come out and I'm like, don't you come outside. Leave me. I'm sit out there in silence for a minute. I was looking at the sky and I was thinking about that. I was thinking about, do you remember in 2015 when the rain started and they were talking about we're going to have the 1,000-year flood? Everybody was making all these memes, right? All the memes were going around joking about the rain and making the rain stop and all this stuff. And then the the realization that the flooding started. And then, of course, they had to release the water out into the river, which was really what set it over the edge. In our area here in Irmo, the river, the early part of the river kind of flooded out a bunch of neighborhoods, and just the real shock of it, like, really hit. Like the realization, the shock wore off, and the realization that this is real. Like, we really are experiencing 1,000-year flood.
Yeah.
Like, our, here was like, and so that's kind of where we are with this too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think it started with the memes and all this other stuff, and the shock is wearing off, and now we're settling into a new reality. Yeah.
It did move into pain and guilt.
Right.
We're like, I know I felt guilty about joking about it as much as I did at first, because it was like, oh crap.
Yeah. Well, and I had to, it's funny, as I sat, I said, like, the concept of denial didn't resonate with me really well. Well, like, the concept of pain and guilt, like, what I kept thinking about as I was thinking about this content was regret. So what happens a lot when people make a change is they have call it 100 different things, but it's really regret or shame loop or guilt. Like, and it's a piece where people say, I should be, like, oh my God, how did I get myself here? How did I do this to myself? Like, for me,
I shouldn't be in this position.
When I found recovery, I said in the blog, like, I'm like 22 and all these people around me are graduating from college. Some of them are getting married. Some people, like one of my good friends, had just had a baby, and I had failed out of like 6 different colleges, and I jokingly said I had a moderately willing hostage in life, and life just wasn't what I thought it should be. And of course, then I laugh about it because I'm like, I felt like my life was over, and I remember being there with you, like feeling there was so much I had to catch up on because I was so behind, and all the regrets. I could literally mull over these like individual decisions that I'd made through the 2 years that I felt like had landed me in that position. And so some of it's just that recognition of, oh shit, this is really where I am. Yeah. That's a hard place to sit.
Yeah.
And it's if somebody dies, it's oh wait, they're really not coming back. Like, they're not going to make that phone call. Like, I'm not going to walk in here and see their face. I'm never going to hear their laugh again. Or if you're separated from somebody by the separation of a relationship, I can remember going through a really bad breakup and seeing the pieces of him all over the place wherever I went, like, and really settling into like, this is my new life without this person in my life. Right. And when I went through burnout, it's like the pain and guilt of, oh wait, like, I have this identity crisis and I don't know who I am anymore. What do you think?
Yeah.
He told me to take the lead. I'm trying to give an invitation to. I'm just trying to make sure you don't want to add anything.
Yeah. No.
Okay. So, and I said that most people feel like they've lost a period of their lives, whether it's a relationship they've lost, whether it's a healthy behavior that they've changed, whether it's been a belief construct that they've kind of let go of, And the thing about it is understanding, well, we'll get to that. So one of the things that I experienced a lot, and I share this in a blog, is when I first got kind of like really started reckoning with this case of burnout, was that I started kind of looking back and going, am I fake? Am I a fraud? Like, is all of this stuff that I've done in my career, is this a fluke?
Yeah.
Like, I really just started thinking that, and then over time, I started recognizing somebody gave me a book that just like literally, as I read it, like just kind of just almost like a slap in the face, like, oh, and it was realizing like I had this deep desire to be competent. Like the idea that it's a fake or a fraud kind of like fell by the wayside because my accomplishments are my accomplishments. Like, I had a therapist say, does, having people not acknowledge it change the reality that you did it? And I was like, oh, but then it was this like the deep seated thing. Right. So over the years, I'd really kind of like started, I was the yes person. I'd always been known to say yes. I was good for commitment. I was good for a lot of things, and I had kind of banked myself on being that person. And then I And actually the quote I said, over time, this settled down, giving way to the recognition that an unfortunate set of circumstances coupled with a deep desire to be seen as capable and competent had driven me into a hurried, busy, overcommitted life I felt resented and trapped in. That was so true. Yeah. So then comes the anger and bargaining, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really kind of the recognition. Yeah. So, I said in the blog, like, it feels instinct to immediately look to the outside
For
blame.
Oh yeah.
To blame,
Mm-hmm.
So if you're sitting with somebody who's gone through a change process
Mm-hmm.
and they're blaming you for it, and you didn't do anything, like that's, I hate to say it's completely normal, right? To blame the system, to blame any
Other
number
people,
of factors. Yeah. Things that feel outside of our control. And the thing about it is although that leaves us feeling crushed and powerless in the end, in the moment, it feels like it gives us some semblance of control. Because if I can just get you to do this, then I'll feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it resolves the previous stage of me being guilty and upset about things that I didn't do. Now I can transition and say, well, I did everything I could. You were the one that did something wrong. This is the reason that I feel like this. So it's, not that these are all linear either, but it is like, it makes sense that you would feel this way after feeling this way.
Right. So it's almost like a bounce back from the recognition, the guilt and the shame is I get angry, and then the bargaining comes in, and the bargaining. And this, I just talk about, like, once you get flamed out of, like, actually, and you recognize that the other person isn't the problem, you want to beg them to be the problem, or you want to beg them. And so some people, like, always use the example of bargaining as, dear God, if you just get me out of this. From a relational capacity, it's that if you'll just be the person I'm asking you to be, then life can be okay. And it's not it's a desperate plea versus a blame, and I can remember, that's why I said I had a moderately willing hostage, like I had already set up this whole pattern of begging this person to make me feel better, and he desperately tried and desperately tried and desperately tried. And I was giving away my peace, and he couldn't give me peace, and drugs and alcohol couldn't bring me peace. In relation to my burnout, like, being the person who said yes and worked myself into the ground didn't bring me peace.
Yeah.
And I said here, then the next piece is like, it went from that to the depression and loneliness. But for me, there's just really this, like, other piece where I loop back to regret. Because once the bargaining doesn't work anymore, right? Like, it's the start to the depression and loneliness, which is the regret of, oh my God, now I've really hustled for my worth with somebody else who's not going to show it for me in that space, or who can't, right? I've played it out with drugs and alcohol, played it out with the relationships. I've played it out with trying to find allies in my professional world who can help me feel like I'm not drowning. And at the end of the day, the only person who can do that for me is me. Yeah.
Yep.
So then, comes the depression and loneliness. And that's where the real turn inward starts.
Yeah.
Because it's the recognition
that I can't get it from out there.
Yeah.
It has to be inside. But I don't have the tools necessary yet, or the connections made, because I haven't done the reflecting.
Right.
So it does feel lonely, and that makes a lot of sense. So I've blamed myself. I blamed others. I realize that it's an inside job. I'm not going to get relief from an external source for this thing that's changed in my life that I wish had been different. And I'm going to have to do it myself.
Yeah.
And it's not, I'm going to have to go it alone, but it's that resolution. I can get help from others, but it's not it's not the solution, the resolution, it has to come from inside. Yeah.
I saw, and I actually reposted it again the other day, a quote that said, destruction is a loud process, and surrender is a quiet process. And it's this piece where, like, we have literally burned down the forest, right? And then I go back to thinking about the big book. They talk about, like, this is the part where we go, hey, my and Gran, the wind stopped blowing. Like, we want to have, like, hey, that moment where we've stopped hustling and we see the truth for what it is, is that's the darkest before dawn part. Like that part where you feel like you've been buried and you really are at the end and there's no hope is actually the moment that the hope happens. I saw a rabbi say one time that there's a Jewish proverb that says that, you know, God comes in to the crack where the heart is broken, you know, and they would have said Yahweh, but so it was this interesting thing. Yeah. So that's where the upward turn comes in. Yeah. So we have this like complete crash. For some people, it's not a complete crash. For me, it's just an acceptance, a realization, you know, but it tends to be this quiet internal process. The moment where we decide to get honest, the moment where we just decide to ask for help, the moment where we have that aha, where we see and recognize the truth of the situation, even if that's just the futility of life as we're living it, or the fact that this relationship isn't working, or that we can survive without this person in our life, or without drugs or alcohol, right?
The more that I'm looking at this, you know, we talk about stage 5 being the upward turn, but it's this, to me, this beautiful reminder of like that principle of something new can't live without something else dying.
Sure.
It's this backwards, messed up spiritual principle. Like the version of me that used drugs and alcohol had to die in order for the version of me that wasn't using that to come alive.
Absolutely.
Know? The version of you that was saying yes and overworking and taking all these commitments and needing, you know, hoping for your worth to be reflected out there had to die in order for you to rebuild the person that gets that from inside.
Sure.
You know?
Well, and
and I think it's a healthy thing. Like I like mountain biking at Harbison. If any of my friends are listening to this, they're like, yeah, you do. You haven't been out there in 2 years, but I will get out there with Greg and Gabriel and Darren. But they do controlled burns out there regularly. And it's this really beautiful thing of that from a burn, from death, from destruction comes
great life.
Great life. And it saves the life of, you know, the rest of the forest. It keeps the forest healthy to have those regular. So to me, I feel like prior to recovery, when I first learned this process a little bit, it was like I waited till the forest was way overgrown, and then it was this major destructive thing where a lot of healthy trees were destroyed in the process. And today, through therapy, through 12-step recovery, through accountability, through sponsorship, through all of those things, it's more of a consistent annual burn, like to keep things healthy going through this process rather than, you know, destroying the entire forest.
Right.
You know,
well, and it's that concept that the path gets narrower, but the ditches get shallower too. Like, so when I go off in the ditch, it's not the complete destruction it used to be. Absolutely. Well, and I'm thinking about like, so I felt like I wanted to talk about this because like one of the things I recognized is saying yes was a symptom of a need. And I was reading this book, Present Over Perfect. And I shared it with a lot of people because it really was a revolutionary thing for me. This concept of saying yes. And she even talks in there about like, there's this brave yes, you know, but for every yes, there's a no. And of course, everybody's like, of course, like, I remember when I got sober and I had a therapist say, you need to learn to say no. So in the next week, I want you to say no to 3 people and offer no explanation. 2 of them can be simple no's and one of them has to be a really complicated emotional no. And it was such a hard thing for me not to offer an explanation as to why I was saying no and just to say no. And then of course, I think about India Ari's song Back to the Middle, because she talks about learning something about herself and then going to the other side of the spectrum. And so for me, I learned to have a backbone, but then I was like, no. I was like a 2-year-old. No. And then finding this middle. Well, over the years, like those outward no's were, yeah, of course. Like, I'm not going to tolerate people treating me poorly. I'm not going to, you know what I mean? There's like, and I've said a lot of brave no's, even in my career. I've stood up against some like institutional stuff and you've walked through that with me because some of them were things where I took a stand on stuff where I could have lost my job, but I was like, I felt very, very passionate about it and stuff. But those yeses, the yes person, being the yes person was what drove me into the ground. And in the book, she talks about that these are brave yeses that she was making, but the no's were what she had to look at. So for every yes to a work commitment, she was saying no to her kids. For every yes to this. And so it left her overburdened and not present. So she was coming home a shell of a person, not able to connect with her family. And so what it looked like for me coming back from this, and this is like kind of the upward turn, the reconstruction and working through, and the acceptance and hope piece kind of together. But like the upward turn was the admission that there was a problem, like that I was done, I was burnt out. And I can remember you and I had some conversations, but the place where I really accepted that was I went to breakfast. I went away for a girls' weekend to Charleston with some girlfriends, and they got down there the night before I did, and I drove down. They got there that morning, and I got there late that night. And I got late, went to bed, and they were already off to breakfast when I got up. So I came to meet them, and I parked and I walked in and I sat down at the table, and they said, "How are you doing?" And I was like, in the middle of the restaurant, just bawling my eyes out. And they were like, yeah, like they just, that space where I was able to go, yes. And then I came home and I was like, something's got to give. And you're like, let's just do this. Like, let's do this. And we came up with a plan. And that was the recognition. And for me, that's where the upward turn happened, because I just felt hopeless prior to that. I felt isolated and alone. I was hustling, trying to get somebody at my, trying to find an ally at work to understand the particular circumstance I was in. And nobody could see it until they could see it. And I had to remove myself for it to be seen. Right. And so, but then what happened? I decided I'm going to start a consulting firm. You're like, I just want you to come do therapy at Cole Wellness, but okay. And I negotiated this whole contract with this government entity. And it was actually a really cool project, something I would have been really good at. I mean, really good at. And I actually had the vision. I had all the players at the table and everything. And when it came time to sign the dotted line, I just said, I can't do this. Like the idea of signing that paper made me want to go to sleep and sleep for 2 weeks. And so I was like, okay. And that was my first step too. I was still saying yes. And I said yes a number of times to things I had to back out of. And that was hard because I was, not the yes person anymore. I had to really contend with that. And I had to learn that saying no up front was okay. And I've had to really work through that. On the flip side of that, as I said no more to those things, I was showing up more here. And where did I see that impact come out? Where my kids didn't trust at first that I was going to show up. Like they were very closed off with me. So very, superficial stuff. But then the moment I knew that kids had settled in and trusted that I was home and present again, was when they started really acting out. And we had to go through a period where they were really losing it, both of them, crying a lot, pitching fits, doing that kind of stuff. And then it settled out, and it's been settled since. We have these moments of flare-ups and stuff, but now, it all set the stage for me to be able to walk through what we're going through now. So I share that. That's the modified version, and I don't want to belabor it, but like I had the upward turn. And the truth for me is I had very few people who understood what I was going through. In fact, when I read Present Over Perfect, I finally felt like I'm not a freak, right? I felt like a freak, and I felt disoriented, and I felt confused, and you were asking me what I needed, and I still can't communicate sometimes what I need because I don't know. I'm still figuring it out. But I pared down the people in my life to the people who could just be with me in the space and not try to control it or tell me what I'm doing right or wrong or to offer judgment to it, right? People who are okay with just sitting with me in that space, and the people who celebrated the real me. And Shauna Nyquist talks about in the book that when you get quiet, you really need to evaluate the parts of yourself you've been pushing against in all of your life. And those are the parts of yourself that you really need to accept. So I'm a dense thinker. I talk a lot. I'm loud, right?
Yep.
All of these are things that I've pushed against for so long. And so I'm learning to accept those things and really to walk through the shame and guilt of having really hated those things about myself for a long time, because pushing against them only made more of those things.
Yeah.
Leaning into them is teaching me to be quieter, to be more reflective, to do that kind of stuff. Although I talk a lot on this podcast. But I'm supposed to talk a lot on this episode. We agreed first that would happen. I know. We're going to.
Sorry, my stomach is just like roaring right now.
So anyway, so the acceptance and hope. So reconstruction and working through, I'm still in that. I find acceptance and hope every day, levels of acceptance and hope every day. But at the end of the day, I'm still walking through it. It's still very much a process. And I can remember you're like, how long is this going to take? And I was like, well, she said in her book, it's taken her 4 years to get to that point. And you're like, 4 years? But it's a process of 4 years. It's not, I've gotten to where I can communicate it better. We can identify it. It doesn't seem so scary and overwhelming. Really quick, did you want to share a little bit about what it was like for you on your side of things?
I guess. I mean, I don't know.
Okay. Just a quick.
I mean, I'm still trying to work through that too. Like this conversation still, brings up fear for me. I think the biggest thing is I just had to allow you to be where you're at and for me to focus on doing what I need to do for me. Right. Because as I was caught up in my own grief over, having this idea of what, life was going to look like as, with your professional career looking one way. And I mean, when we walked through it, like originally when we started building Cole Wellness, my dream was to have you be a part of that. And during that time period where you were saying yes everywhere else, I had to, get honest with you about the fact that I was a little bit hurt that you wanted to do all these government projects and run a nonprofit and do all of this other stuff.
Right.
So I had to grieve the fact that, at first it was like, well, this is going to be me. This is going to be, I mean, it's us, but it was primarily going to be me. And so then I got what I wanted, but then I was in fear of, well, what the fuck are we going to do with money? You know what I mean? Right. And that was really scary. And that's, just something to work through and allowing you to, just because I don't know what that, feels like to be you going through that. I can't imagine going through that. And so it's not my responsibility to try to make it right, to try to fully understand it, to try to, I just have to allow you to work through your own process and try to play the role of husband and also focus on my own reconstruction and working through and acceptance and hope and all of the things that we talked about. But that was definitely a weird process for us that we've had to work through because, as of yet, I'm a little bit behind you on the life scale, but as of yet, I have not reached anything like that.
No, I know.
I mean, I have my own form of burnout where I have to begin paring back, but it's never been this like complete deconstruction of the entire paradigm of life kind of a thing.
Right.
A professional life anyways.
Yeah.
So, but I'm encouraged by it. Like I look forward to, I used to joke with you about the fact that, you would say, I'm not going to do therapy. I don't want to do therapy. And I pushed you for years to do it. And every freaking day you'd come home from work and be like, the red tape and the government policy and this stupid meeting and yada, yada, yada. And I hate all that. But then this family came in and I worked with them and time stood still and I loved it. And I'm like, you need to do therapy. No, I'm going to run an organization and I'm going to do, that's not me. But the parts that you love are connecting with people. And that's where you're excellent at too. You know what I mean? And so that's been a piece I've enjoyed now that you're doing more therapy, that you do that really, really well. And you, from an outsider's perspective, this process has led you to something more enjoyable instead of creating that story of what you think you're supposed to be or what you think other people will value you as. Like, it's like as soon as you started doing therapy, like I've never met anybody in our profession. There's not a single person in our profession that when I told them what you're doing, that they're like, oh, fuck yeah, I can't wait to refer people to her because she's excellent.
Right.
And everybody knows that.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt about that. So you don't need the validation elsewhere. You get it every day from your clients and from our kids that are sleeping in at 11 o'clock in the morning.
We left them sleeping so we could do the podcast.
We do have to wrap up.
Yeah.
That was excellent. I think your blog was excellent. I look forward to it being fine-tuned and reading it. Thank you for another good episode.
Yeah. And if you're going through a life transition, you're still not sure where you're going, keep going.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the whole point of this is that the life transitions don't have an end point.
Yeah. And in our experience, they don't have an end point, and always gets better.
Yeah.
It's really painful in the process, but like we are so better off today for all of those transitions. For your burnout, we're better off today.
Yes.
Recovery, we're better off today. All of those things that we talked about.
My breakups were better off today.
Fuck yeah. Excuse my language. The hell with those people. All 4,000 of them. Next week, talk about something else.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Keep
what
going.
are we going to do next week?
I don't know. We're going to do some interviews at some point again, too. So
Yeah.
I don't know. We're going to talk about it. We'll get back to you.
Okay.
But you can follow us at colewellness.com. All of our blogs, podcasts, social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, although I don't even look at LinkedIn ever. So if you're following us on there, hopefully it's
Forgive our lack of activity there. I just can't. That's part of my emotional space. I can't take on all the social media stuff.
Yeah.
I'm trying to homeschool my kids.
Thank you to Scott Fowler Media for helping us out with all of this through the quarantine.
Scott rocks.
Yeah, Scott rocks.
If you go look at our content, like we write the copy, but he does all the, he does all of the graphics. He does, he sets all this up. He does everything. So we sit down and record it.
And when he doesn't have enough copy, he does it on his own, and only those are the ones that everybody likes. So we just need to let him do it. But anyways, thank you very much. Thank you, Scott. I love you too. I love you, Scott, if you're listening this far. Anyways.
Thank you.
Have a good week.